All praise be to Jesus. I just wanted to talk about something that I've struggled with on my walk. I think it's something that rational atheists will struggle with on their walk as well, because it's part of the different way of thinking about things as an atheist, as opposed to someone who believes in God and the biblical God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Jesus Christ, our Savior. And biblical truth, the biblical worldview, how that differs to the rational atheist worldview, because it's a different mindset, a different way of looking at the world. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, and it's a challenging topic. It's a challenging topic. I don't know how well I'm going to do in this video, but I'll do my best. But basically, I tried. The way I tried to figure things out before I came to God was, I had a rational approach, and I'd look at evidence and I'd think things through logically, and I'd try to sort of round things off, like, put all my information in a line and sort of tie it all together and come up with a conclusion, and then, sort of solidify some understanding of reality or whatever I was thinking about, trying to create a system of understanding, or, a methodology, or to tie things up in a bow. Let's say, get a bunch of knowledge and arrange it in a particular way and figure out the links between all the different elements and tie it up in a way that made sense, and then come to a conclusion on that topic. That's the way I tried to think of things. And I never really got to the end point with that. I mean, you might say that I found God, or he found me. He woke me up, however it actually happened. But I never got to an end point. But that was my approach, and it was it's the only approach you really have as an atheist, when you're trying to figure things out for yourself, and there is no absolute truth, or perhaps that you believe that there is an absolute truth, but you don't know what it is, and you're trying to figure it out. You've got no solid ground. You're sort of starting at Descartes, and I think therefore I am, and trying to go from there, and which assumptions do you make, and how do you really know what's true, and that approach. But it's a rational approach to truth. And one of the big challenges in switching worldviews, let's say, is getting comfortable with not knowing, and that's something. It's hard to become comfortable with not knowing when you're an atheist, because it's all on you. There's nobody taking care of you. There is no God. It's just you and the world, basically. And maybe it's you and your friends, or maybe it's you and your work colleagues, or however it is. The people you're with. It's you against the world, and you've got to figure things out. You've got to do things yourself, and it's up to you. It's up to you to figure out the world. There's no book that you can read where some omniscient person has divinely inspired a book, and you can therefore rely on that. That doesn't exist if you're an atheist. And so you have to sort of rationally think things through and be logical and gather evidence and try to compare things. And it's difficult to actually come to a conclusion, though, because when you come down to it, it depends on what your standard of evidence is. But when you raise the bar on the standard of evidence, it becomes quite tricky to actually nail down any particular truth. But I wanted to talk about the two different worldviews and sort of how they work. And I don't know how well this is going to go. I have written a few notes for this one, sort of this versus that. Like, the first thing was intellectual framework versus faith. Intellectual framework, sort of truth. Like, you come up with, it's just like the two competing worldviews, two ways you might look at things. So with a rational worldview, you might come up with an intellectual framework of how things work. Like, you might think that you might base it on government, for example. You might think, all right, we need a capitalistic, we might need a free market economy, a democracy, and kind of ideas about who's allowed to, or who should be allowed to vote, or how the voting process works, how long the terms should be, how many members. Should you have an absolute democracy, or sort of an electoral college, and you might have sort of ways in which you think the world would best work, and you've got an intellectual framework, based on that, based on something. You've got something to hold on to, or maybe it's an environmental perspective, and you think, well, we've got to live in the world, so therefore we need to take care of the environment, and so what's good for the environment, and what's the perfect balance that humanity can have with the environment, and then maybe that's the angle that you come at things on. But the problem with these frameworks, of course, these it's perspectives, these ways of looking at the world, is they're all limited. You can never really. It takes a lifetime to become an expert in one thing, and just becoming an expert in one thing doesn't mean you necessarily understand another thing. You could become very good at understanding economic theory, but not very good. By doing that, you don't necessarily gain an understanding of environmental sustainability, and you might be an expert in economic theory and be good friends with somebody who's an expert in environmental sustainability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're an expert in the happiness of the population. Being an expert in one metric doesn't necessarily make you an expert in another. So there's sort of flaws with intellectual, and in any framework, any way of understanding the world that you might have, there's flaws in it. But when you're with God, and when you've accepted Jesus as your savior, and when you have his spirit, and when you trust God, and when you have faith, sort of a faith-based system, it's a different way of looking at the world, because you're not worrying about all of that stuff. You're not worrying about the big picture so much, or at all, really. You're trying to do your part. God has a role for you. He has, he's planned out what he wants you to do, and you're trusting in him to take care of everything outside of that. You're just worrying about what you have to do. So that's sort of what faith is. And I think, in the world at the moment, with things going so badly, it's hard to have faith. If you don't have faith in God, it's hard to have faith in anything else. Most of the institutions in the world have failed, and I would say probably all of them. But if you're basing your happiness and well-being, or your understanding of reality, on a properly functioning government, for example, well, I think the world has proved at this point that government doesn't work. I mean, there's been many different types of government that have been tried over the course of history, and they've all failed, and democracy is coming to its end. It's coming to the end point of its usefulness, and the world systems are failing. So what do you have faith in as an atheist? Well, it's yourself, maybe, but then if you're honest with yourself, you fail as well, and you don't know the answers, and you haven't fixed the world. And if you're really honest with yourself, you know that you can't, because you're just one person. And even if you did become a global dictator or something, you still are flawed, and you don't know enough. You're not good enough to run the entire world, and there's no answer, basically. So trusting in God. I'm not a religious person. I don't follow Jesus for that reason. I don't trust in God because I don't see another solution. I trust in God because I believe that God is real, and I've had experiences in my life that have proved that to me beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that's not the reason, but it's a good thing once you come to faith to realize that you don't need to worry about the world. The world, God is going to take care of that. You just need to worry about yourself and your role, and to play your part. So some of these other things that I've written down here are sort of, because the ways of the world are different to the ways of God, you might say, because this world at this time is run by Satan. And I think it's interesting to contrast some of the differences in approach, let's say, of God's leadership versus Satan's, because God is, at this point in history, it can be difficult to sort of see his hand in things, more difficult than it is to see Satan's, because Satan's sort of really showing his true colors at this point. But there are some things that are interesting to think about, so evolution, for example. I don't believe in evolution that's not God's way, I should say, but that is Satan's way. And what I mean by that is, so I don't believe in biological evolution. However, I do believe in technological evolution. What I mean by that is, you've got computers, for example, and they start off and they are a certain speed, they've got a certain amount of RAM or whatever, and then the next one comes out and it's faster, and it has more RAM, and you get the graphics cards eventually come out, and then this and that, and there's upgrades. And there's an evolution of technology, not just in computers, but in all sorts of technology. And you throw out the old stuff. It's survival of the fittest when it comes to technology. And that's the same way it's going to be with artificial intelligence. And it's also going to be the same way with when people start connecting into technology more. Like, you can already see that now. If you don't have access to the internet, you're at a disadvantage in the modern world, because there's a lot of information on the internet that gives people who do have that access an advantage. Once you start connecting technology into your body, maybe you've got a plug that goes into your head, or maybe you've got nanobots in your body or something, and they're upgrading your body. Upgrading, I mean, this is Mark of the Beast, sort of very dangerous type stuff I'm talking about here, but we are literally getting to the point where if you don't upgrade, you'll be left behind, and there is a survival of the fittest sort of mentality or aspect to the world that's going to come in with humanity. But that's Satan's way. Basically, you upgrade or you become outdated, and you get killed off, or you become obsolete. That's not God's way, though, as I understand it. As I understand it, God's way is we're all together. So, like, I can't imagine. This is sort of my speculation, more so than based on the Bible. But I can't imagine God developing a society in which some people get left behind in the way that happens in this world. Like, if you have a family, a loving family, a big loving family, you don't let some of your family accrue all of the money and develop advanced technology and develop control systems which allow those members of your family to control the rest. You don't let that happen. It's not fair. It's not nice. It's good for the people in charge, but it's not good for anybody else. So I think that's a difference between Satan's way and God's way. The survival of the fittest, and the competition, and the way business works and things like that. That's Satan's way. It's not God's way. What next? Service. So service versus servants. So as a leadership style. So Satan's leadership style is basically like, when you're a leader, you have people under you and you command them to do what you want them to do. Whereas God's way, I think, is the opposite, where when you are a leader, you are the servant. So this is, it can be seen in the life of Jesus. Jesus washed the disciples' feet, for example, and Jesus was a servant while he was here. And Jesus is God, but Jesus is God made flesh. So God was on the earth, washing people's feet. I mean, it's a completely different approach to Satan's way, which is basically you sit, in a Pergamon altar or whatever it is, and you have a pyramid structure of power in which Satan is at the top, and then there's the levels of abuse, you might say, down below. The peoples at the bottom of the pyramid have the least power and serve the people above them. So it's a difference in the leadership style, and I think I prefer God's way. I think if you are stronger or smarter, or not smarter, more knowledgeable, a more capable person, then in Satan's kingdom that would mean that you move up the hierarchy and then you can command the people below. Whereas in God's kingdom, I think it's more like, a lot of this video is speculation, so I'm not speaking on behalf of God. I'm trying to say the right things, but don't quote me. It's not biblical, but this is just my interpretation of things. I prayed to God through Jesus before I started this, to ask him to give me the right words. And so hopefully I'm saying good things here. Hopefully I'm not misleading you. But yeah, if you're a knowledgeable, strong person, if you're capable, then that means you are more capable of helping other people, helping the people who are beneath you and who are struggling. And imagine if the world was run that way, in which instead of people who are successful, getting the big house and throwing the elaborate parties and being mean to their, employing more people to do the dirty work. Imagine if instead, when you gain knowledge, you devote yourself to spreading that knowledge. You have something that nobody else has that you can spread. Well, you spread that knowledge, or you you develop a skill that's helpful to other people, you utilize that skill as best you can to help other people. And imagine if every single person in the entire kingdom was doing that. It'd be quite good, I think. And that's God's kingdom, as I understand it. Yeah, the truth will set you free versus the lies that control you. So the knowledge is power. In Satan's kingdom, this is Satan's kingdom. The lies that are spread are the lies that control you. A world is run by lies, basically. I mean, even at a fairly, let's say, naive secular level, it's still obvious to see that there are secrets that control our world. I mean, you know that there are intelligence agencies and government secrets, and there are business secrets, and there are patents, and there's a lot of control of information. Some of it's, like when it comes to patents, some of it's open, but there's a control on information, hidden information. And because there's information hidden, that gives the people who have access to that information power. And then by lying to people and misleading people, you can then control people, mislead people about the nature of reality. That gives you power if you're in control of the information. So that's the way Satan's kingdom works. It's a way, it's a control system. Whereas in God's kingdom, the truth will set you free. God is a God of truth. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So, it's about spreading the truth, spreading knowledge, spreading the truth, and empowering other people. It's not about controlling people through withholding information, holding something over people. It's, rising up in the system means that you're then serving other people. And if you're serving other people with the truth, if you can make other people better, that means they're helping you. And if everybody's helping each other get better, we're all growing and we're all getting better all at the same time, all helping each other. I mean, what an amazing kingdom to live in. A much better way of doing things, I would think. The truth will set you free. Imagine if everybody's telling the truth. Confusion versus being okay with not knowing. So this is kind of like the faith thing. One of the things that I struggled with coming to faith was a lot of things I don't know. And there are a lot of things I still don't know. Like a lot of spiritual things, which are things that are beyond understanding. Like one of the things that I think, I've been asked, and I think is common to ask, is, why would God allow evil to be in the world? Why would God allow Satan? Why didn't God arrange things in such a way that all this evil stuff didn't happen? And I have an answer to that. Like I personally have an answer to that, and that's that this is an example so that basically everything that can go wrong is going wrong in this period of time. And then we have a book called the Bible, and we're going to get the ultimate version of it when we in the next world, without all the variations that exist in the world today. We'll just have the version. We'll have God himself on the earth. We'll have Jesus here. He can explain it to us, and we'll have all of the examples of everything that can go wrong will have already happened, and we will have experienced it firsthand. So that's like a reason why things are happening the way they are. And another reason is because of free will. God wants us to have free will. He's given us free will. And so if we have free will, He can't force us to be good. We have to have the opportunity, the ability to be evil and do the wrong thing. We have to have that choice. Otherwise, there is no choice. And if there is no choice, there is no free will. So that's another reason. And there are other reasons as well. But that's not necessarily a satisfactory reason, and it's not a complete reason. Like there's, with a lot of things, like the resurrection as well. Like what Jesus did when He came and lived on the earth and lived a sinless life and then died for our sins and then was raised after 3 days. What that actually means, it means a lot of things. The totality and exactly what it means and the full significance of what that means, I don't know. And there are a lot of things that I don't know. I don't know the answer to. And if I was to study the Bible intensely for the next 10 years and pray and do all of the right things for the next 10 years, I still wouldn't know, because God's a complex person. He created everything, and everything is quite complex and interesting, and there's a lot going on. So yeah, I think you don't know everything, and you're not going to know everything, and you have to be comfortable with not knowing everything. But there's a contrast between that and confusion. The Babylon, Mystery Babylon, the confusion through mixing, it's Satan's way. God isn't trying to confuse you. The reason you don't understand everything is because it's not possible to understand everything. There's a difference between that and deliberate confusion, which is what Satan does. Mixing the lies with truth, mixing different truths together in such a way that it's confusing, mixing lies together in different ways that are confusing, different levels of truth, different levels of lies. It's sort of a contrast between God's way and Satan's way. And living in God's kingdom, we're not going to know everything, but at least we're not going to be deliberately confused. We have to pass 20 minutes, so I'll continue this in the next one. God bless.